The story of the United States is not just a tale of a nation being born, it is the story of an idea of freedom, independence, and the pursuit of self-determination. The roots of America's formation stretch back to the 17th century, when European settlers crossed the Atlantic in search of new opportunities, religious freedom, and uncharted land. What began as a series of scattered colonies along the eastern seaboard would eventually unite into one of the most powerful countries the world has ever known. But this journey was anything but easy. The first seeds of what would become the United States were planted with the arrival of English settlers in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. Life was brutal and unforgiving. Disease, hunger, and conflict with native tribes threatened survival. Yet, perseverance pushed the settlers forward. Over time, more colonies took root: Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and beyond. Each colony developed its own identity, but all shared a deep yearning for self-governance and independence from foreign rule. By the mid-18th century, the relationship between Britain and its colonies had grown tense. The British Crown viewed the colonies as sources of revenue to finance its global wars, especially after the costly 7 Years' War. Taxes and trade restrictions like the infamous Stamp Act and Townshend Acts fueled resentment. Colonists protested with the rallying cry, "No taxation without representation." This tension erupted into outright rebellion in 1775, marking the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. Farmers, shopkeepers, and tradesmen transformed into soldiers. They were outmatched, under-equipped, and facing the strongest military power of the age, the British Empire. Yet, they were motivated by ideals of liberty and self-rule. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted, penned largely by Thomas Jefferson. It was not merely a statement of secession, it was a revolutionary document declaring that all men are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words would echo across centuries, inspiring freedom movements around the globe. The Revolutionary War was grueling. Washington's army suffered devastating losses at times, but perseverance, French military support, and brilliant strategies turned the tide. The decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781 forced Britain to recognize American independence. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris formally ended the war, and the United States was born. But independence was only the beginning. The newly formed nation now faced the monumental task of governing itself. The Articles of Confederation, the country's first governing document, proved weak and ineffective. States quarreled, the central government had little power, and the young republic teetered on the edge of collapse. In 1787, delegates convened in Philadelphia to draft a stronger framework, the U.S. Constitution. It was a masterstroke of political engineering. Balancing power between the states and the federal government, it created three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, to prevent tyranny. The Constitution was ratified in 1789, and George Washington was unanimously elected as the nation's first president. America's foundation was now set. But the path forward remained rocky. Internal divisions, economic struggles, and deep moral contradictions, especially the institution of slavery, threatened unity. Still, the United States pressed ahead, expanding westward with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, doubling its territory and fueling the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that the U.S. was destined to spread across the continent. However, this expansion came at a tragic cost to Native American tribes, who were displaced, exploited, and decimated. One of the darkest episodes was the Trail of Tears, where thousands of Cherokee and other tribes were forced from their lands, leading to immense suffering and death. America was building its nation, but not without scars. The 19th century tested America's very survival. Industrial growth surged, cities expanded, and immigrants poured in. But slavery divided the country like nothing else. The agrarian South depended on enslaved labor, while the North increasingly opposed the practice. Tensions boiled over into the Civil War in 1861. This 4-year conflict was the bloodiest in U.S. history, claiming over 600,000 lives. It was a battle not only for the Union but for the soul of the nation. Abraham Lincoln's leadership, combined with the Union Army's perseverance, ultimately triumphed. The Emancipation Proclamation and the eventual abolition of slavery with the 13th Amendment marked a turning point. The United States reaffirmed its unity and its commitment, at least on paper, to liberty for all. But post-war America faced daunting challenges: Reconstruction in the South, rebuilding the economy, and addressing racial inequality. Despite setbacks, the nation continued to grow, fueled by the Industrial Revolution, technological innovation, and an influx of immigrants seeking the American dream. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States had transformed into an economic powerhouse. Railroads spanned the continent, factories roared, and cities grew at unprecedented speed. America was no longer just a republic struggling for survival, it was becoming a global force. As the 20th century dawned, the United States entered the global stage. Its involvement in World War I signaled that America was no longer content to remain isolated. Though late to join the conflict, U.S. troops and resources tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. The war demonstrated America's industrial and military might. The interwar years saw both prosperity and hardship. The Roaring Twenties brought innovation, jazz, and economic boom, but the Great Depression of the 1930s devastated millions. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal provided relief and reshaped the government's role in society, laying the foundation for modern social programs. Then came World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. mobilized on an unprecedented scale. American factories churned out weapons, ships, and aircraft at record pace, becoming the arsenal of democracy. U.S. forces fought across Europe and the Pacific, playing a decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. The war ended with America not just as a victor, but as a superpower. The post-war era marked the rise of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a global struggle for influence: capitalism versus communism, democracy versus authoritarianism. The U.S. led the formation of NATO, established military bases worldwide, and invested heavily in science, space exploration, and defense. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe, strengthening U.S. alliances and cementing America's leadership. At home, the U.S. faced internal battles for civil rights. The mid-20th century saw leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. demand equality for African Americans, pushing the country closer to its founding ideals of liberty and justice for all. Despite resistance, landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 reshaped American society. The late 20th century witnessed America's dominance in technology, culture, and the global economy. From the moon landing in 1969 to the explosion of Silicon Valley in the 1980s and 1990s, the U.S. became synonymous with innovation. American music, movies, and culture spread worldwide, creating a soft power influence unmatched in history. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 left the United States as the world's sole superpower. Its military was unrivaled, its economy vast, and its cultural reach global. The phrase, Pax Americana, described a world order largely shaped by U.S. power and influence. But the 21st century brought new challenges. The 9/11 attacks in 2001 shocked the nation, leading to the War on Terror, long conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and debates over America's role in the Middle East. The 2008 financial crisis tested economic resilience, while rising powers like China posed new challenges to U.S. dominance. Yet, the core strength of the United States remained: its ability to adapt, innovate, and reinvent itself. America's military budget, democratic institutions, and technological edge ensured it remained at the forefront of global affairs. The U.S. continues to act as a guarantor of international stability, even as it navigates complex relationships with allies and rivals alike. At its heart, the story of America's formation is about resilience. From struggling colonies to a fractured union, from economic depressions to global wars, the U.S. has consistently risen stronger after every crisis. Its contributions to science, technology, culture, and democracy have shaped the modern world. Today, as debates continue about its future role, one thing is certain: the United States stands as a nation born from struggle, built on ideals, and strengthened through perseverance. Its journey is far from over. But its foundation, rooted in the pursuit of freedom and the determination of its people, remains unshakable. The rise of the United States is not just the history of a country. It is the history of humanity's constant struggle for liberty, opportunity, and progress. And as long as those values endure, the story of America will continue to inspire the world.